And welcome back, everyone, to Lantern Corps. Today's Lantern Corps comes from some Danos Wallen. I might have butchered that name. I really got to work on my handwriting. Who asked the question, what is the Lantern Corps of SpongeBob SquarePants? That's one of those impressions I can do a creepily good version of. That and Elmo. Elmo I can just do a very weirdly impressive impression of. I'm not going to do Elmo because we're talking about SpongeBob. SpongeBob is a unique character for a series like this because, yeah, he's had moments where he's been down in the dumps, where he gets angry and all that. But if we're looking at what his core emotional state is, there's like 3 options and an outlier option. So let's get a couple of the not happening ones out of the way right now. He's not a Black Lantern. That's not happening. He's not dead, nor has he ever died, nor does he represent any sort of absence of emotion. He's also not a Lantern of Sorrow, though he's certainly been sad. The only way I think he could qualify for Sorrow, and again, we know very little about Sorrow, they're the most recent ones, is if you caught an episode where he was like severely depressed, and even then it would just be that episode, not his entire personality. He's not an Ultraviolet. Shame does not work in his favor. And he's not a Lantern of Rage or even Fear, because he's certainly not driven by revenge or anger or rage, and he certainly doesn't inspire great fear. Right out the gate, green is kind of a go-to for SpongeBob. You have to be able to overcome great fear, and even though SpongeBob is very cowardly at points, like he's a very big scaredy cat in many different episodes throughout his entire season or career, despite all that, he still usually works up the courage to do the right thing, to confront the enemy, whatever it takes. And it takes great will and imagination to do that. Well, not well, but it takes great will to do that, which is what the requirement to be a Green Lantern is. Add on, he has a very vivid imagination, particularly what we see with his bubbles, and he could be a very good Green Lantern. But there are 4 other really solid options, I think, for SpongeBob. A second option is Hope. This man is an eternal optimist. He very rarely has he ever been kept down for more than, say, an episode or 2. And even then, there's very few episodes within SpongeBob that have an ongoing story. Usually it's episode to episode is what the story is about. And it's one entire story. So he's very rarely is he a downer. He always seems to have optimistic viewpoints of life. He always seems to be very hopeful. It's not faith-based hope, mind you, but it doesn't always have to be faith-based hope. Faith-based hope just is a good representation of the Blue Lanterns. So I would say blue, honestly, I'd even go blue farther than green. I think blue is a better option. But what about gold? Well, see, gold is one of those really weird ones. Someone kind of put it best. In real life, you'd have to be a sociopath to be a Gold Lantern, to be eternally happy all the time. But if you really break it down, I don't think it's always, if I had to guess, I don't think it's about never not being happy. I think it's about weighing your options, and if the bulk majority of your emotions throughout your life has been just joy and happiness, like say 90-10. 9% or 1%, or 90% and 10%. Like 90% happy, 10% anything else. I think that could still qualify you for a Gold Lantern. But, I mean, because it'd be near impossible to never feel like angry or annoyed or sad at all. It's near impossible for that. So I have to assume that the ring might be just kind of weighing its options a little bit with certain individuals. I mean, like, yeah, but 95% happy, 5% the other stuff, we'll take it. In SpongeBob, again, the eternal optimist always seems very chipper and happy most of the time. There have certainly been points where he's been upset, absolutely angry, or just completely inconsolable. So I certainly think it's an option, but because it's not an eternal happiness kind of thing, like it's not a consistent throughout his entire life kind of thing, I'd say this is a possible if we were to redefine the qualifications. But beyond that, not just being an eternal optimist, but being the guy who just loves life. SpongeBob is a character who really does just have a lust for life, who has a real, just pure enjoyment for living. He's content jellyfishing and flipping patties. And he is happy with that. He enjoys it, and he still goes on wacky adventures, and being a sponge, he's kind of functionally immortal. So life isn't actually a really good qualification. Now, I will actually say too, someone brought up that Black Lanterns, and you might be wondering why I'm talking about Black Lanterns, but it's important, represent the lack of emotions. And while they symbolize that, that's not the requirements for being a Black Lantern. Because the White Lantern is the opposite. It's the culmination of all the emotions. But that's not the requirement for being a White Lantern. Being a White Lantern, you're a Lantern of life, you need to value life. You need to protect life. You need to nurture life. Now, granted, some of the later on those like limitations of not really inflicting damage or anything like that, or killing, I think they could get lifted to some degree if it was for the greater good of something, and like the greater protection of life. I think that's like the stipulation. But yeah, there's a reason, for example, Batman, who can run the entire emotional gambit, really. Batman has great will, does inspire great will, has great rage in him. He has a lot of compassion. He also has a lot of love in his heart for the right people. He inspires hope in some people. And he's a man who's never satisfied. It's the ongoing mission. He's a man who can qualify hypothetically for every Lantern Corps in the right circumstance. But there's a reason the White Lantern ring, when it attached to him briefly, said, nope, not the right candidate. Because it's not about the emotions when you're talking about life and death. They're more abstract concepts than that. So someone brought up the whole Lanterns of Death, Black Lanterns, and the qualifications. And that's just, I wanted to illustrate that point. But Spongebob could be a White Lantern. I think he'd be a pretty good White Lantern. But I want to throw a curveball suggestion here, and bear with me on this. There's an argument to be made he could be a Lantern of Avarice. Spongebob, while I did say he's content with flipping patties, he is really much a lust for life. Has a lust for life. Someone actually pointed out that SpongeBob actually has a lot of the 7 deadly sins in them. All the main characters kind of represent that. Mr. Krabs is greed. He would be an avarice lantern if we ever did him. I don't think there's any argument to that. Patrick is sloth. Sandy is pride. I can't remember who Squidward was. Is he envy? I want to say he's envy. SpongeBob was depicted, and I think maybe Plankton is not avarice. He's wrath. I think he's wrath. And SpongeBob's depicted as lust. Now, lust and greed aren't the same thing, but they do share some traits with each other. And SpongeBob really is kind of never sits still. Even when he's at work, he's always very active. I don't think he truly ever sits still. I think he's never truly satisfied. He's always looking for the next thing to do and enjoy, which is a very positive version of avarice, but a lack of satisfaction is part of greed and avarice. So while I don't think it would be his dominant trait, in fact, I think it would probably be the weakest core here, I think there is an argument to be made for this. But that being said, what are our 3 big contenders? Because I've already said, green, I think. Actually, I would say this: gold is probably the second least likely, just because in almost every episode he has a moment where he kind of snaps, either just is in despair or gets angry, and he's had some blow up moments. He does, absolutely. And like I said, green is probably isn't a candidate. He could be a Green Lantern, but I just don't think it works here. So that leaves us with the Lantern Corps of Life and the Lantern Corps of Hope. And these two are tough to choose. These guys it's really an interchangeable option here, I think. What do I think is the more likely? Because he's kind of content in in some parts of his life with just working, all that, but also content just as his life goes, but then still goes on adventures. I think if I were to go between one or the other, and I think both are honestly a solid option, I would go the Lantern Corps of Hope. I think, again, he's kind of just the eternal optimist. And that hope kind of rubs off on other people. Yes, he annoys a lot of people, but that hope rubs off on other people. And so I'd say hope is SpongeBob's best chance for a Lantern Corps, but I would also say life is the second best, definitely. Green is probably your third, gold fourth, and then I think there's at least an argument, a discussion that can be had for greed. And then if you want to get any of those moments where he's down on his luck, say, or not down on his luck, but very, very just depressed and upset. For example, when Squidward played the prank on him and he was just completely upset and just emotionally wrecked. Maybe sorrow could work in those types of circumstances, although we know later on that was actually an April Fool's joke of his own. So yeah, those are my 5 candidates. I think I'd lean towards hope as being the dominant one. Life is the immediate second. Then I go green. Then I go gold, and then I go orange. That's my thoughts, though. Who do you think? Who do you think? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you later.